If the only way that you can get your point across is going and raping and beheading people, then you're probably a terrorist and you're probably an extremist. I do have an issue with that. I do have an issue with the fact that...
But you only care about protecting one side, whereas the other side is assaulted.
No, I don't actually. No, because if...
And humiliated.
Okay, let me respond.
And all you want to do is cancel their speech. You're part of cancel culture and admit it right now.
Can I
You're
respond?
talking about protesting people.
Can I respond?
Americans.
Can I respond?
Americans.
Okay, let me respond. Just to be clear.
You've lost the right wing.
Just
You've
to
lost
be clear.
the left wing. You've lost America. America's not going to stand here and let Israel
You can keep shouting or we can have a debate.
All right, folks. Well, it's been a while since we've reacted to our favorite rage pig, Cenk Uygur, but I simply could not help myself because recently he went on Piers Morgan to debate about the Palestine protests that you're seeing across the country. And needless to say, he had a pretty ridiculous and unhinged and frankly hilarious meltdown about it all that was completely unprovoked.
The Palestinian protesters, the peace protesters, they hate the Jews, they're anti-Semites, all the Jews are...
Like, just to contextualize, this was not something that escalated. You know, sometimes you get into a debate, it gets a little heated, you guys start shouting at each other. No, the moment they brought Cenk in, he immediately starts screaming here.
Americans!
Can I respond?
Americans!
And we'll react to that at length and in full here today, but first, just to contextualize and frame it a little bit, first thing I want to say here is that I think the way Cenk acts is actually emblematic of the greater symptom or the problem with the pro-Palestine side or whatever you want to call it, which is that they simply cannot get out of their own way, right? Even when maybe someone like Cenk makes a valid point, even when potentially public opinion actually starts to turn against Israel, which is something I think you saw over the past couple of months before these protests, before, Iran attacked Israel and all of that, they just cannot keep the lead, right? They always have to do stuff that is totally ridiculous or over the top, whether it's these protests that are now, in my opinion, drastically turning public opinion certainly against the pro-Palestine side now. Same case here, frankly, with Cenk Uygur, which is even when he's saying some things that maybe people would agree with, he can't not say them in such a ridiculous way to where he sounds like a complete clown, because he'll come in and immediately say, Piers Morgan, why are you doing this? You racist, whatever. Just to contextualize a little bit further, in the beginning of this very long segment, Piers Morgan essentially gives a monologue talking about how he doesn't agree with these protests and necessarily their methods and how they're being a little bit over the top and ridiculous. And here's just a tiny clip of that to give you an idea of Piers's central point here.
So we can have unpleasant shades of the BLM riots in 2020, a fundamentally just cause which became toxic and divisive, fueled by people who know little about the issues, a lot about causing chaos. And quite apart from the absurdity of the individuals involved, it raises serious questions and contradictions. Many of former President Trump's fiercest critics shuddered at his blatant crackdown on most 2020 protests. How does St. Joe Biden's supporters defend the scenes we're witnessing now? And on the other hand, many of the staunchest defenders of free speech have been the loudest supporters of Israel and the fiercest critics of the campus protesters. So where is the line? And is it the police or the protesters who've crossed it?
Which, I personally don't think is a totally ridiculous or out there take, right? I think it's actually a very valid point, and bringing up to what I talked about earlier, I think in many ways, again, Israel was losing the PR war before all of this. Whether you agree with it or not, I think it's just a statement of reality, which was the longer this war was dragging on and the longer, the pro-Palestine side was out there talking about quote unquote genocide and all this stuff, I think a lot of Americans were actually souring their opinion on the pro-Israel side. And then what has happened since is that these protests are making such a mockery or a ridicule out of that side that now Americans are now more favorable to the other side, right? I think we understand how that works. But regardless, whatever your opinion on it is, okay, here's what Cenk Uygur responded with. And again, this is basically the first moment he talked in the entire show. And this was his reaction to all of that.
I haven't called them terrorists. That, ironically, is a lie. Cenk, I want to bring you in. You're getting very angry about this too. Just to be clear, I am expressing an opinion that what has happened at Columbia has crossed a line. And that if I'm a Jewish student there, I think it's completely outrageous. I'm being intimidated and harassed for the actions of Israel's government thousands of miles away. That doesn't mean I don't have very strong views about what's happening in Gaza, because you know that I do. So where is my lie in all this?
Yeah, Piers, I've just listened to you for 20 minutes frame the issue in a purely 100% Israeli propaganda way. So if you say, hey, listen, Jewish students shouldn't be harassed or attacked, of course I agree. I've got
you
Jewish
agree with
family.
me? So why have I lied?
Yeah, no. Stop interrupting.
Exactly. Actually, I think a valid point by Piers Morgan, but okay.
When Israel slaughters 25,000 women and children, we're saying, oh, I don't like a pro-Palestinian chant. A chant? That's what we're concerned about. And now you turn to the violence that has happened on college campuses. There is one case of overwhelming violence, and that happened last night at UCLA. And it was pro-Israeli protesters that violently attacked the peace protesters that didn't do anything. Where are the arrests? Where's the outrage? Where's the indignation? You pretend that you care about protecting students, but you only care about protecting one side, whereas the other side is assaulted.
No, I don't actually. No, because
debased and humiliated.
Okay, let me respond.
And all you want to do is cancel their speech. You're part of cancel culture and admit it right now.
Can I
You're
respond?
talking about protesting people.
Can I respond?
Americans.
Can I respond?
Americans.
By the way,
okay, this is not the United States of Israel.
Fine.
America.
All right, you made your point.
To protest a foreign government.
Okay, let me respond.
Okay, you guys see exactly what I mean. I understand the point that Cenk Uygur is trying to make. Now, in fairness, I don't know if I'd call them just straight up peace protesters, because there have been assaults by the pro-Palestine side. And, yes, it is true. That case you saw in UCLA was arguably, in my opinion, a symptom of lawlessness, right? UPD was not doing anything in general, and then that happened. But that is true, right? That was pro-Israel people who came in and tried to break up the encampment because the police were not. Okay, fair enough. But, it's important to note, I guess, at the same time that these people are setting up illegal encampments in the middle of college campuses and stuff, whatever. Still, regardless, I understand what Cenk Uygur is trying to say. However, when you so comically melt down and really just make a fool out of yourself like you did there, when, again, this was unprovoked, he just comes on, everyone is talking in a civil tone, and then he just starts shouting, it doesn't really make the best case for your side. He certainly does not seem to be, from an outside perspective, like the mentally stable one on the panel or the reasoned and logical one, does he? But anyways, let's continue here.
By the way, you talk about cancel culture. I'm entitled to my view without you and Dr. West screaming liar, genocide supporter, and all this other bullshit.
Okay, you condemn the UCLA pro-Israel thugs.
Let me make it clear.
You condemn them. I'm doing the same thing you are.
Wait a minute.
Do you condemn them?
Wait a minute.
Or are you pro-violence?
Can I answer the question? So when you talk about, this is a private university campus, they are entitled to not have their buildings desecrated in this manner, and they are entitled eventually to have the police remove them.
Be honest. When they were doing it in a public space, everybody in media, in American media, said, how dare they do it in a public space? They do it in a private place. You go, how dare they do it in a private place?
No, you shouldn't be breaking into buildings full stop.
You know what? When Martin Luther King in Selma, Alabama, crossed the Edmund Pettus Bridge, you know what they said? How dare they interrupt the bridge? How dare they go in a public place? How dare those protesters? Civil rights leaders should know their role, should know their place, boy. That's what people like everyone in American media is saying right now to the people in favor of not slaughtering any more Palestinians.
Yeah, I think
you guys sound exactly like Bull Connor.
Okay, so in fairness, I don't speak for American media. They obviously have their own agenda. I'm highly critical of them. But from my personal perspective, my criticism of, the Palestine protesters has never been them protesting. It's been when they, quote unquote, in public, do things like block roads, right? When they stand on the freeway, when they make it impossible for people to get to work, to get home to their families, whatever it is, and Cenk Uygur clearly here is trying to frame that as civil disobedience, right? That's when I've had an issue with it. But on a bigger picture here, you want to bring up MLK and how he practiced civil disobedience. Really? If I were to be honest, the central criticism of the Palestine people on campus now is not even necessarily that they're setting up illegal encampments or all this stuff or, obstructing people from getting to class. At its core, It's really just that the people are clowns. I mean, you look at them, they're annoying, they're obnoxious, they're entitled, they're saying very stupid things. There's a reason they keep getting mocked repeatedly by frat guys and the normal college kids on campus. Like, as someone who goes to college myself right now, that's what I'll say about it. It's not even a greater comment on their cause or what they're even protesting, as if necessarily outside of a school like maybe Columbia, protesting your university administration is going to do some big thing against Israel. It's really just that, again, the people don't know how to act and they're just kind of clowns, which I think in the case of Cenk Uygur, there are strong parallels there, but, you know, whatever.
Piers, you keep going back to the most obvious question in the world. Should Jewish students be protected from harassment or assault?
Yes.
Obviously.
So you both agree with me?
No,
so
no.
Why does that make me a
Let
racist?
me finish. Let me finish. You've got now 20 to 30 minutes of propaganda saying, oh, the Palestinian protesters, the peace protesters, they hate the Jews, they're anti-Semites, oh, the Jews are in danger, etc. And I'm saying, of course, let's protect them. And then you make it seem like that's the 98% of the issue, when in reality, the only protesters that have been massively violent are the pro-Israel protesters. And to this second, not only did you mention it for about 2.5 seconds
I even
out of
have
20
a video
minutes,
on my
but
Twitter
you still haven't condemned them. So do you condemn them, Piers, the violent thugs?
I deliberately...
Hold on. The racism charge? No, because everyone who defends Palestinians in this country, no matter what they say, like I'm a perfect example. I condemn Hamas. I want to protect the Jewish students. I want a beautiful pro-Palestine and Israel. I want two states. And we're called anti-Semites, including by your guests, 24/7. The minute someone calls you a racist back because Muslim lives don't matter, all of a sudden everybody catches feelings.
Yeah, except I haven't called...
It only goes one way. It only goes one way, right?
I tell you what.
I
have never called you an anti-Semite. I've never called Dr. West an anti-Semite.
That's right, but almost every guest
I've never called either of you racist, and yet both of you have gone along with calling me a racist, even though I'm not. So yeah, if you're going to dish it out,
are you going to ignore the framing, Piers? Piers, are you going to ignore the framing? You know you framed it this way, and Piers, you're not alone.
You were booked,
not the
all of
culprit.
you, just to be clear.
Hold on, Piers, let me give you a little bit of credit.
What is even going on right now?
Just to be clear.
That's why I come back on this show.
Just to be clear.
But the American media is filled with racist against Muslims. Right. American politicians are racist against Muslims, and they revel in it. Rivers of blood in Gaza. And the American politicians and the American media say, not enough, kill them more, Israel, kill them more.
Yeah, just to be clear.
Anyone who objects to the wide slaughter of those people is called an anti-Semite.
Just to be clear.
The American media is sick.
Just to be clear, you were all booked to take part in a debate specifically about the protests at Columbia. So when you're asking, why am I focusing on the protests at Columbia, that is why you were all booked for this segment and debate. So don't try and be disingenuous with viewers and make out that you were booked for any wider purpose, because you weren't. I wanted to debate all the issues around what's going on in Columbia. And what is interesting to me...
Let's talk about Columbia.
Let me finish.
Let's talk about Columbia.
Let me finish.
Those peace protesters are the same ones that
I'm sorry, you don't just keep talking on my show. I'm sorry.
Banished and propagandized against people like you.
Yeah, I'm not a propagandist. I'm not a racist or any of these things, right?
War is always great. Peace is always the bad guys. It's absurd.
It is absurd,
insanity.
I agree with you about it being absurd.
Piers, do you get that we are vomiting your propaganda? We can't stand it anymore. It isn't just about you. It's all of media, all of the politicians with their nonstop propaganda that the people in favor of peace, the people who want to protect innocent lives, are somehow pro-terrorists, are the bad guys, are the anti-Semites, are the racists, etc. We're sick of the overwhelming propaganda.
Yeah, I'm pretty sick of being called a racist by you guys. So we've all got a cross to bear. Let me bring.
So I asked you whether the IDF were terrorists. Are the IDF a terrorist organization killing innocent children? Yes or no?
Do I think the IDF has very serious questions to answer about the way they are executing this war? Absolutely. Do we have international criminal courts? Do we have criminal courts and laws and rules to hold them to account? Absolutely. And do I want them to be held to account? Damn right I do, yeah. And do I think they should be invading Rafah? No, I do not.
Don't mean that much to you, man. Come on.
Oh, it does mean as much to me. Let me bring in Javier again.
No, they don't mean that much.
Javier, this debate has got very unpleasant for reasons that are slightly lost on me, given what the debate was supposed to be. Cornel, let Javier speak.
Okay. we're going to cut it off there. I think you basically get the idea. If there's any idea to even be absorbed from all of that, I frankly have no clue. And this, I think, in many ways highlights what the greater problem is. Cenk Uygur, right? Prime example of the Israel-Palestine debate is that in many cases, both sides are incapable of having what is truly a rational response, at least, the extremes of both sides. Because, on one hand, you have the Palestine side, and they act like Cenk Uygur most of the time. If you remotely, defend any type of Israeli policy, you're a genocidal racist, whatever it is. They're doing what they're doing on the college campuses right now, which, again, is just a clown show. It's just a complete freak show. And, of course, if you criticize that freak show, then you're a Zionist shill, whatever. And then on the other side, of course, there's plenty of people on the Israel side who will throw out the anti-Semite label every 2 seconds. They also brought up on this debate the quote-unquote anti-Semitism bill that passed the House recently that is just a blatant violation of free speech. It basically makes many criticisms of Israel as well as literal passages of the Bible to be illegal because they're declared as against civil rights law and anti-Semitic and whatever. And by the way, I agree with Cenk Uygur on that. So with that said, I guess I will just speak for normal Americans by saying that we are tired of having a foreign conflict being fought by proxy on our own soil. We're tired of one side literally occupying college campuses and public spaces for one side in this foreign conflict, although to some degree, it is kind of funny in the way that it's a protest against Biden and it's the left fighting the left. But, bigger picture here, we're also tired of being forced to curtail our own speech and, our own Constitution and First Amendment to cave to the other side. We, hot take maybe, are also tired of being forced to fund, frankly, both sides in this conflict. And that's why, frankly, some of the scenes you have seen recently out of SEC Southern schools like Ole Miss have actually had me a little bit optimistic. Take a look here. Why do I say that? Well, because just take a look at these pictures. Take a look at the pictures of these crowds side by side. Folks, let's be real. Do you think many of these frat guys necessarily know the intricacies of Israel versus Palestine? No. Do they understand necessarily that in many ways this Palestine protest is also a protest against Biden? No. And frankly, folks, it doesn't really matter because what this is now a backlash of the normal people, the normal Americans, the normal kids in Gen Z like us who are simply now standing up to what we have known in our generation for years to be the annoying, weird, dysgenic hippies who are constantly just out there whining about everything, causing a bunch of problems. And finally, again, normal Americans are just standing up and saying no. Notice how the counter protesters at Ole Miss specifically are not even flying any Israeli flags or anything. It's just American flags, a little bit of Trump stuff. Why? Because it's not about Israel-Palestine to us. It's about the fact that we as college kids, especially down south around here, want our campuses to no longer be occupied by the weirdo hippie losers. And as I wrote here, it's really an issue of the normal college students like you, like me, like many of you, just find the protesters to be generally annoying, which they are. And I, as a Gen Z normal person, I will say, am glad to see that now many of the other normal Americans in my generation are finally standing up to the other side, which are the miserable weirdos who are wearing masks that you're seeing now on the campuses. And to me, that's what this really boils down to. That said, folks, let me know your thoughts on all of this in the comment section down below. Do you think Cenk Uygur is making legitimate points? Do you think he's just a clown? Do you think he needs to learn how to handle himself? And what does that imply for the greater Free Palestine movement, who I would argue, again, in many ways, just do not know how to get out of their own way, okay, because they can't avoid apparently acting like idiots and turning people against them. And yeah, okay. That said, be sure to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. Alpha moves only. God bless. Have a very great rest of your night, and peace.